And as we've entered this new year, 2024, I decided we got to stop hiding. We got to stop lying. Even if some people don't like the term cyber war or World War III, the fact is it's a reality. It's happening and we need to embrace it. And the more we try to hide or the more we try to pretend it doesn't exist, we are actually making the problem worse and not helping it. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome, 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 welcome. You know what time it is? It's time for Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. E is in the house. Always a pleasure to spend some time with you. I hope you're getting a lot of great information out of these podcasts. But before we get into today's topic, which is a really important one, the one that many people don't really want to accept, and as we've entered this new year, 2024, I decided we got to stop hiding. We got to stop lying. Even if some people don't like the term cyber war or World War III, the fact is it's a reality. It's happening and we need to embrace it. And the more we try to hide or the more we try to pretend it doesn't exist, we are actually making the problem worse and not helping it. So as Chief Information Security as security leaders, we need to embrace it and own it and share the message instead of hide or try to bury it. But before we get into that fact, I always like to talk about a key skill set. One of the key skill sets that any CISO must have, and if you want to be a world-class CISO, you have to become a master of this. And the skill set is what I call building a garden. And I know it sounds bizarre, building a garden. What do you mean by that? So let me explain. If you want to catch a butterfly, there's really two ways to do it. One way to catch a butterfly is to do what most people do. Get a net and go out there and chase the butterflies. Now, you have to recognize that butterflies can fly and you can't, which means there's a good probability they can outmaneuver you. They could fly higher, right? They can be hard to catch. Now, if you're persistent enough, could you eventually catch a butterfly? Yes. Is it hard? Is it tricky? Is it going to take a lot of time, energy, and effort? Yes. And then, if you want to catch another butterfly, you have to put in the same level of effort, and it's a lot of work. So chasing things are hard because guess what happens when you chase something? It automatically runs from you, right? If you go to chase a butterfly, it's going to fly away. It doesn't know your intent. It doesn't know why you're trying to catch it. It's scared and it's going to fly away. So when you try to chase things, it tends to make it a lot harder and a lot more difficult. But there's another way to catch a butterfly. And the other way to catch a butterfly is, what if you build a garden with beautiful flowers that attract butterflies? Very interesting. Now, what happens? Now, the butterflies come to you. And now, you have all the butterflies you could ever imagine because you've built the garden. You're drawing them in, and now you're getting everything you want. Now, if we translate this into the real world, into reality, to being a Chief Information Security Officer, let me explain what I mean. Most Chief Information Security Officers, when they're in a business or a company, they're trying to get what they want. They want to catch a butterfly. They want to have somebody act and behave a certain way or follow certain rules or behave certain things. So you go and you try to force this upon directors, vice presidents, and even executives. But because all it is what you want, your self-interest. You want this to happen. You want to catch the butterfly. They're going to be resistant. They're going to push away going, well, this is not how we've done this business. You're making more work for me. You're making things more difficult. Like, for example, one thing you have to be able to do is change the current paradigm. The current paradigm in most companies is the business executives do whatever they want. They have all the authority, and you have all the responsibility for security. So if they don't listen to you, or they don't do what they're supposed to, or they don't follow any of the rules, and a breach happens, you get fired, not them. Even though you told them not to do it, even though you said they shouldn't do it that way, they have the authority, you have the responsibility, you get fired, they're off the hook. So you need to change that. It's a broken model, it's a flawed model, it doesn't work. But now if you go in and all you try to do is change that, going, whoa, whoa, whoa. If you want the authority, you have the responsibility, we're pushing it back on you, and I'm going to go tell the executives that you're accepting all these risks, and you're at blame, not me, and we're putting all of it on you. So if you don't listen to us and you don't do what you're supposed to, then you're going to be held responsible and not us. Great idea, great concept, but it's chasing butterflies. You're trying to force something on them in which there's no inherent benefit to them or no reason why they should do it. Now, can you be successful? Yes, but it's like catching butterflies. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of energy, and it's a lot of effort. So what world-class CISOs know and recognize is they go in and say, wait a second, what if we build a garden? What if we start providing immense value and benefit to the business units? What if we start putting together methods and models that help them become more successful, that help them understand and implement security in a way that enhances the business and enhances functionality? Now you're building a garden. And the concept of building a garden is you're providing benefit to them, so they want to come to you, and then in return, because you're providing benefit to them, they don't even realize it, but you're providing benefit. They're providing benefit to you. So that's the trick. When you're chasing butterflies, you're forcing an agenda on somebody that only benefits you and hurts them. When you build a garden mentality, you're providing such immense value to them that they're providing value to you and they don't even realize it. And that's the idea of building out a security program. That's the idea of putting together a risk posture for an organization, where you go in and say what is and what is not acceptable risk, what will and will not be tolerated, and you show them the value and the benefit to the organization, and you make it crystal clear. Listen, number one rule is always this: if cybersecurity negatively impacts the business, cybersecurity is wrong. We're owning it, we're accepting it, we're never going to get in the way. But what if we can give you models and methods that are proven, that we've done with other business units, that will add value, that will add benefit, that will immensely expand how you run your organization? All of a sudden now, you're building the garden. So I just wanted to share that little paradigm shift, because the difference between an average CISO and a world-class CISO, average CISOs are focused on getting organizations to do what's in best interest of them. They are forcing a security agenda. They're forcing entities to do things they don't want to do, and they're forcing business units to do things that don't have any perceived benefit. World-class CISOs flip it. World-class CISOs provide immense value. World-class CISOs are indispensable. And when executives think about a world-class CISO, they go, wow, we need to involve them in all business decisions, because every time we do, it increases benefit, it increases revenue, and it increases profitability. That's how you want to be viewed. You don't want to be the CISOs that I see in a lot of companies where they're like, oh, I guess we're supposed to involve the CISO because we agree to, and security is important, and blah, 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 all that jazz. But we know it's going to be painful. We know they're going to do things that want to hurt the business, that want to decrease revenue. It's just a frustrating process. That's not the CISO you want to be. That's not the CISO that excels, and it's not the CISO that companies enjoy and like to have around. You want to be that CISO where they're like, oh, we have to involve Dr. Cole in the conversation. It's crazy. I know he's a security person, but whenever we involve him, he always comes up with new ideas. We always end up increasing the benefit to the business. We increase profitability. Customers love it. We increase revenue. It's always a win-win when we involve Dr. Cole. That's how you want to be viewed within the organization. So I urge you, take a quick self-assessment if you're an existing CISO or if you're a security engineer. How are you currently viewed? Awareness, awareness, awareness is everything. Being aware of how you're viewed is critical in order to fix it. Because if you're not aware, how can you change it? And this is one that's always hard. I know when I was younger CISO, I always walked around thinking I was the bomb. Oh yeah. You know what I mean? And I was magic, right? People loved to have me around. And then I overheard a few conversations and a few emails were accidentally sent to me, or my boss forwarded me a few emails and be like, dude, wake up, smell the coffee. It ain't good. It's burnt coffee. If you want to continue this way, you can, but you are pissing everybody off within the organization. And I fortunately had a really good boss that I didn't appreciate at the time. I thought he was a little bit of a jerk, when in reality, I was probably the one that was a little bit of a jerk and had a lot to learn there. But the reality is, wake up and accept the truth. How are you viewed? How are you currently viewed? How do you want to be viewed? Because once you get that clear, then everything starts changing for you. So now that we sort of got that out of the way, I sort of want to jump into the second part, or the title of this podcast, which is, whether we like the term or not, whether we accept it or not, we are in a cyber war. We are in World War III. How else can you explain what is happening? How else can you explain when you have attackers from all over the world that might or might not be affiliated with certain governments? Some definitely are, and some aren't, waging war on companies, on citizens, and on governments. It is a war. And as soon as we can recognize that, the better we'll be able to address it. And this is a message you have to get across to your executives. This year, if you do nothing else but convince your executives that we're at war, and they are part of the war, and they can either be victims in the war, or they could be victorious in the war. If that's the only thing you could do this year, it will be a great year. And let me explain why. Because they don't understand what's really happening. I talk to a lot of executives, and what I hear is, Eric, once in a while, a company gets broken into, it gets compromised, it's sort of random. Somebody just decides to go after that company, or maybe they scan and they think they're a little weaker than others. So we just want to go in and we want to play the faster than the bear game. As long as we're a little better than everybody else, we're going to be okay. Now, if you're not familiar with the faster than the bear game, here's how it works. There's two friends, at least they were friends beforehand. You'll see why I say that. There's two friends that are hiking. And as they're hiking through the woods, they sort of look back, and they notice that a bear's following them. And they sort of look back, and the bear looks a little hungry. So they start walking quicker and quicker, and the bear keeps following them. So all of a sudden, one of the two friends drops, takes off his boots, puts on his sneakers. And his buddy looks at him and starts laughing like, dude, what are you doing? You're not going to be able to outrun the bear. Why would you put your sneakers on? You know how fast bears are? There's no way you can run that quick. And he looks at his friend and goes, dude, I don't need to outrun the bear. I need to outrun you. He's going to get one of us, and I'm betting on you, not me. Right? And that's sort of the idea is you just have to run faster than other people. Now, maybe if we go back 15 or 20 years ago, when there was a period of time where cyber attacks you could loosely say, they fall under the opportunistic category, where they'd scan some sites and ones that were vulnerable, ones that had weaknesses, they would typically target. And if you were just a little better, a little faster than all the other companies, you'd be left alone. But I would argue that that is true when you're just having random cybercrime. When you're in a war, that's not true. When you're in a war, everybody is a target. Everybody is going to be part of the battle. And at some point, everyone is going to be targeted, attacked, and broken into. So thinking of it as a war shifts one of the most fundamental beliefs that most executives have, which is false, is we are not necessarily going to be a target. We might not be victims of cybercrime. We might not be broken into. And that is a false reality. The reality is this: you have been broken into, and you will continue to be broken into. That's what a war is. A war is continuous. A war is nonstop, and a war means it has happened, and it will continue to happen to your business. I always find it humorous because I give a lot of keynotes. I travel around the world, and sometimes when I'm giving keynotes, if my flight isn't until later in the day or sometimes the next day based on how that works out, I listen into some of the other presentations. And it cracks me up today that companies and even CISOs, some of them are still naive enough to believe that they are not broken into, that they are not a target and they have no incidents. Once again, over and over again, but I was sitting at an event and I'm in the back of the room and there was a panel discussion. And it had some pretty good CISOs from some pretty big companies that you would all recognize on the panel. So I figured, just for fun, I'd listen in. And they go, okay, let's introduce ourselves. And the first CISO gets up, and you could tell a little bit of an ego. And he proceeds to go in and say how he has the best program on the planet, how they have the top-notch security. He would predict they're in the top % of all security in the world. And he goes, and to prove it, we've had no incidents and no breaches for 3 years. And it was like, the crowd was excited. You heard people like, yeah, yeah. And like he was almost doing like this victory dance. And I'm sitting there like, really? This is really happening. And then the next CISO gets up and he sort of makes a little side comment and goes, well, I didn't know that that's what so-and-so was going to say, because the way I was going to start is that we have incidents every 3 to 4 months. We are always under attack, and we are always catching, responding, and minimizing damage, minimizing impact. But yeah, we have multiple breaches a year, and even sometimes multiple breaches a quarter. And like you almost felt the crowd turning on him. Like you almost felt like it was this negative bad thing that he just confessed the worst possible sins that anybody could actually ever confess. And this sort of continues, and they move on. And I'm sitting there in the back of the room thinking, this has to be, and I've seen a lot of crazy stuff, but this has to be the most galactically stupidest thing I have ever seen on planet Earth. If we want to be real and we want to be honest, the CISO, the first one, that actually was arrogant to believe they've had no incidents and no breaches for 3 years should be fired for malpractice. And the one that actually was smart enough to realize and recognize that they do happen and to look for the incidents, to look for the breaches, that one should have been cheered and carried around on everyone's shoulders. But we still have this misconception because we don't want to accept we're in a war. We don't want to accept we're in a cyber war, and we don't want to accept we're in a world war. Because when you do, the first CISO makes no sense. And the second CISO makes all the logical sense in the world. So we have to recognize that you are being targeted. You are being breached all the time. What are you doing about it is the question. Now, just so we're clear, if you don't think we're in a cyber war and you think that attacks are just random, catching the slowest person, right, not targeting anybody, then you could falsely believe that prevention works and you could stop all attacks and you could go 3 or 4 years without a single breach or a single incident. But if you accept the reality that we are in a cyber war, you can accept the reality that we are in a world war, and everybody, every company, every country, and every individual is involved, then all of a sudden, you realize that 100% security doesn't exist. And you realize that it's not about prevention, but it's about detection. And you realize that you are going to have incidents all the time, and if you're not seeing them, it doesn't mean they're not happening. It means you're not looking in the right place. If you don't think you're in a cyber war, you could falsely believe the goal of cybersecurity is to prevent all attacks. If you know we're in a cyber war and accept the reality, you know you can't prevent all attacks. You know that 100% security doesn't exist, and you know that the goal of cybersecurity is to detect attacks in a timely manner to control and minimize the damage. It shifts everything. It shifts your mentality, it shifts your approach, and it shifts how you set up your overall security, which dives into the next area that I just hinted at, which is prevention versus detection. If you don't believe you're in a cyber war and you believe there's just some random attacks that occur, a preventive mindset works. You believe that you can prevent all attacks from happening. But if you believe you're in a cyber war and you're constantly being targeted, you're constantly being attacked, you're constantly having people trying to break in and hurt your company for many different reasons, then you realize that prevention is ideal, but detection is a must. And you realize a bulk of your energy and a bulk of your effort needs to be on detection, detection, detection. How quickly can we detect attacks? And then you put your energy on prioritization. Prioritizing so you actually have visibility. Do you realize that the current technology in place at most companies is actually detecting attacks? I've worked on many of the big breaches that you've heard about over the last 3 years, and in every one of them, every single one of them, when I came in and I looked at their current security models that are in place, some of, if not all of, their security software that they were running 24/7 actually detected the attack. It detected it multiple times and set off multiple alerts. Here's the problem. The technology was generating 20,000 alerts a day, and the current team, and this varied per company, but the current team was only able to respond to about 200. If you're generating 20,000 alerts and your team can only respond to 200, you are missing 19,800. What is the probability that you're looking in the right area to catch the actual attack? Probably minimal. So you're missing it. So it's not a technology issue. It is a tuning and prioritization. So if you recognize you're at war and you recognize you can't fight all battles, you got to pick and choose. You got to pick and choose which are the ones you want to fight, which are the ones you want to defend against, and which are the ones you want to detect, which should be the highest, most impactful. And now You retune your security software so it's only generating 200 alerts. It's not generating 20,000. Now, every alert that's generated, you respond to because your team can handle 200 and it's generating 200. So now you're aligned. But Eric, doesn't that mean you're missing 19,800? Yes. But look at it the old way. You were missing everything. You were fooling yourself. If you're generating 20,000 alerts and you have no prioritization and your team is just randomly picking 200 out of the blue, you're fooling yourself. You're really not catching anything. You're really just wasting a whole lot of time, energy, and effort because there's no prioritization and there's no focus to your overall program. But if you know you're in a cyber war, now you prioritize. Now you pick and choose. Who and which are the worst attack vectors? Let's prioritize and let's focus on those, because here's the reality. I would rather your team focus and catch the 200 most critical attacks and defend against them on a daily basis than randomly pick and choose and miss the most important ones. So it changes your approach. It changes how you focus and align. And then also, if your executive team that you report to as a chief information security officer, they know and understand that this is a war. They understand that we're in the war. They understand that we're being shot at daily. They understand we're being targeted daily. It now changes and shifts how you approach security. Now, if you're in a war, you get daily status updates. Right? You're very close to those on the front line getting daily status updates to understand what's happening and what's occurring. If you're not at war, if you're in peacetime conditions, where there's no war, there's no fighting, there's no enemy, you maybe get an update once a month or once a quarter. You don't need as timely updates. It's not as important. Peacetime conditions have lower reporting and lower prioritization than wartime conditions. The problem is, because most companies and executives have never been told or explained the reality that we are at war, they're playing peacetime conditions during a war. Well, if you play peacetime conditions during a war, you're going to lose. You need to be communicating with your executives about the risks and the exposures and which ones are unacceptable and which ones are above the reasonable risks that you've defined, and make them aware of that on daily, weekly basis. They need to be actively involved in the process, because remember, cybersecurity is not a technical problem. It is a business problem. Business problems cannot be solved. They can only be managed. And when you're in an active war, they must be managed on a daily and weekly basis. So it comes down to, how often are you talking to your executives? How often are you communicating to your executives? How often are you sending status reports to them to make them aware? So one of the first things I want you to do is, if you're still not convinced, you're like, Eric, still not fully convinced we're in a cyber war, I want you to go and read Cyber Crisis. That's exactly what I wrote about. There's an entire chapter of what I just covered, where it's about protecting your business and real-world threats. Then, once you read it, I don't want you to put it on your shelf. I want you to give it to your executives. Have them read it. Maybe if they hear it from a different voice or a different person, they will recognize and see that we are at war. But the reality is, the sooner you and your executives can understand and recognize that we're in World War III and you are part of the war, you would be able to shift and change how you approach security. And once you do, you'll then start being able to implement effective security, because the reality is, peacetime conditions and wartime conditions require different security measures. And unfortunately, most companies are implementing peacetime security conditions and they don't even realize they're in an active war.